Hello and welcome back to the course on Python programming. Today we're talking about basic operations with data frames. Alright, so let's get started. We've already spoken about one type of operation, and let's recap on that. Already spoke about subsetting. Let's refresh. So if we have our stats data, so we'll say stats head, and from here we want to subset certain columns and certain rows. Let's have a look at that. We'll say stats, and then inside a list, so this is going to be our list, we need to pass the columns that we want to subset. Let's say for a change we're going to subset country code, comma, birth rate, and then comma, internet users, right? So that's how we can subset just all the 3 columns and all of the rows. If we want to subset certain rows, we can say 4 to 8, run that. And there we go, we've got the 4th to the 8th row, so 8 not inclusive. That's how we subset data frames in Python. The next thing we're going to talk about, so that's number 1, spoke about subsetting. The next thing we want to talk about is mathematical operations. You will notice that they are very similar to operations with matrices. So if we want, let's say, result equals, and let's say we want to take birth rate and multiply it by internet users. Now, it has absolutely no meaning, this parameter, or this resulting calculation has absolutely no meaning whatsoever, but just for practice sake, we're going to multiply these 2 columns. Let's say result equals stats dot birth rate multiply by stats dot internet users. Run that. Let's look at result. Same thing, head. There we go. So we've got the multiplication of the 2. 808 is apparently 10 times 78.9, or 10 and something times 78.9, which is correct. Okay, there we go. That's how we multiply the 2. You can do division, addition, subtraction, and all those sorts of things. Very simple. So basically Python will know to perform this element by element or row by row, this operation. That's a very powerful feature, so you don't have to cycle. The other option would be to create a loop and go through these rows one by one and do the multiplication one by one. You don't have to do that. You can just specify the multiplication of column by column, and Python will know what you're talking about. Similar to what R does. So now we're going to learn another trick, is how to add a column into your data frame. So let's have a look. Add a column. I'm going to say stats, and I'm going to add a column myCalc. So basically what you have to do is just pretend that the column already exists. Now you can't do that quick approach. You can't just say stats.myCalc, that won't work. But you can do the normal approach, stats, square brackets, myCalc equals stats. And let's basically just take this and copy it. So we'll say that's where we're going to put our multiplication. And now if I look at stats.head, you'll see that myCalc has appeared here. So we basically added a column to our data frame. Beautiful. Very, very nice. Now here I wanted to show you a comparison. So as we're going through this course, we're comparing it to R. And if you haven't taken the R course yet, or if you haven't played around with R, not a worry. You will be able to recognize these things when you do start learning R, and they'll probably help you, or you can always come back and check these things out again when you are learning R. So comparison to R. You will notice that in R, we could have done something like this. We could have said stats, XYZ, and this is actually an example directly from the R programming course. You could have said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And that would have worked. Let's see if it works here. It doesn't work here. Why doesn't it work here? It says length of values does not match length of index. And basically what that is saying is that you only have 5 values here, Kirill, and in your data frame you have 195. What are you thinking? How am I supposed to deal with that? How am I supposed to put 5 values into a column into your data frame if you're supposed to have 195? You're supposed to give me 195 values, right? Like logically, yeah, it makes sense that it doesn't work, but why would it work in R? Well, in R we had that concept of recycling vectors. So in R this would have been a vector, and because it's a vectorized programming language, it knows to recycle the vector. So as long as you supply some values here, what it'll do is it'll take this and it'll just basically copy, paste until it has enough values to populate your column with the required 195 values. As you can see, Python does not do that for you. And there you go. That's another example, a vivid example of the difference between a vectorized programming language and a non-vectorized programming language. Error, let's just type it in, .no recycling option. All right, good to know. So what are we going to do next? Well, next we're going to learn how to remove a column. So let's look at removing a column. So what are we going to do? We're going to first look at stats.head. That's our data frame. And now we want to remove this column, myCalc, because it has no meaning whatsoever. What were they thinking when they put this column in here? Let's get rid of it. So how do we do that? Well, there's a very useful feature, and the feature is called stats.drop. So the drop method, it's not a feature, it's a method. We can specify which column we want to get rid of. So myCalc, and here, so if I run this just like that, it'll give me an error. Why? Well, that's because by default it's looking for rows. So this is used to drop rows. You can specify which rows you want to drop out of your data frame. In our case, we want to drop columns, so we're going to type in 1 here. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to show another way. So I'm going to say comma, and I'm going to press Shift Tab on my keyboard, and it gives me information. That's why Jupyter Notebooks are so lovely. It gives me information on this function. So here it says stats, return new object with labels in requested access removed. Stats.drop labels, so we supply the label, myCalc. Now access by default is 0. Then we're not going to worry about these, but axis by default is 0, and 0 is this axis over here. Yes, they are called axes. So this is 0, this is axis number 1. So we're going to say axis 1. And you notice I don't have to, I can, so if I Shift Tab again, I can say axis equals 1. Around that, you'll see that that column has been dropped. Or I don't have to say axis equals 1. So press Shift Tab, because it's going to take them in the order they come. So first we'll look for the labels, which is either one label or a vector or a list of labels. And then it will look for the next parameter. In this case, 1, it will be like, all right, so what's the next parameter in the function signature? It's axis, so that 1 must refer to the axis. If it was another parameter, then it would refer to label, another one refer to false. So you either specify the name equals the value, or you can just specify the value if you know in which order they come. So in this case, we just say 1, and that has been dropped. What you will notice though is if I look at stats.head, it's still here. How so? Didn't we just drop that column? Well, let's have a look at the function again. So I've pressed Shift Tab. You'll notice here it says return new object with labels and requested access removed. So it returns a new object, it doesn't modify the previous one. Let's go down here and look at this. So how do we fix that up? So how do we actually drop it from our object? Well, we'll just replace, we'll just say stats.drop, or actually we'll do it here, stats equals stats.drop, myCalc. And now if we look at stats head, you'll see that it has been dropped. So we have to overwrite our data frame with this new object in order to actually drop it in the data frame that we're working with. All right, so those are the things we learned today about working with data frames. Let's quickly recap. If we go to the top, basic operations. So we already know about subsetting. There was a whole tutorial that we devoted to this topic. We just refreshed on it here. Then we talked about mathematical operations, where we learned that you can just multiply columns by columns instead of creating a loop and going through every single row and performing that calculation. Very powerful feature, very similar to what we have in R in terms of vectorized operations. Add column, we can add a column, just pretend that it's there and populate it. Don't use the short, quick method, use a standard method like that. And also we quickly compared to R that there's no recycling option in Python. Python does not recycle your lists if they're shorter than your data frame. And finally, we learned how to remove a column. Very simple process. Just use the .drop method, and don't forget to specify the axis to equal 1. That means columns. There we go. Hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Until then, happy coding!